Okay, here's a video on linear translations. And you should know what translations are. We're just moving shapes or lines. In this case, we're moving lines, linear equations, and we're moving them on the graph. We're moving them up, down, left, or right. So we're moving them vertically or horizontally. Okay, so what do we mean by that? Well, so here we have a linear equation. It's a line, right? Put the arrows there. And we're just moving it. We're going to move it on the grid. So we can move it up. That's vertically. We can move it up vertically, up. We can move it down. We can move it horizontally. We can move it to the left or we can move it to the right. So we can move, if we're going to move it up, let's say we'll move it 2 up. So every point on this line will be moved 2 up. So here's 1, 2. There's a point there. From here we'll move it 2 up. From there we'll move it 2 up. And from there we'll move it 2 up, and so forth. Every point on the line. And from here, let's say, we'll move it 2 up, and so forth. And then we'll have another line. So that's what a translation means. We're moving it, we're sliding it, we're shifting it into another part of the plane. Okay, and if we had a ruler, I'll just use an edge here. I can make a rough line here. And we can make a new line. So we'll have a little line, put some arrows, and there's our new line. So in this case, we translated it vertically. We moved it up. We moved it up 2 places each time in each point, any point on the line. So that's what a translation is, a linear translation. Sometimes what students get confused with is some symbols. So if we look at f of x, that's one thing you really need to know to solve linear translations. You need to know what f of x is. And we've done this before. So f of x is basically a function notation for y. If y equals 2x plus 5, we can say that f of x is y. We can write it like this, f of x equals 2x plus 5. So these mean the same thing. These are both linear equations. Now we can plug in x for any number. We can say f of 0, and that just means that we're making 0x. So 2 times 0 is 0. 0 plus 5 is 5. So f of 0 means 5. And if we had f of 1, we're just saying 2 times 1 is 2. 2 plus 5 is 7. So we can make f anything. We can make f of negative 1. So 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. And negative 2 plus 5 gives us 3. So just remember, f of x just means y. Now sometimes when we're doing linear translations, we'll use f of x, but we can use other lines. We can use stuff like g of x or h of x. So let's look at f of x equals 4x. So here's a linear equation. We know that y equals 4x. That's what it's saying here. And over here, we're saying we have another equation. Call it g of x. We can call it h of x. A lot of times you'll see f of x, g of x, sometimes h of x, I of x, and j of x, and so forth. So you need to know substitution here also. Here we're saying f of x is 4x. Now we want to translate here. So g of x is saying that we're going to take whatever f of x is minus 9. And what is f of x? F of x is 4x. So instead of saying 4x, we can say now g of x is 4x minus 9. Now when you see something like this, where x is by itself, just f of x, minus or plus a number, it's vertical. We're always going to go up or down. So when you see something like this, we have f of x, x is alone in the parentheses, and you have plus k, and k is any number. In this case, k was 9. It's either plus k or minus k. So if you see a plus k, you're going up. Minus k, you're going down. Just remember that. So let's review. We're saying that f of x was 4x, and g of x, another line, was whatever f of x was, minus 9. And f of x, says it right here, f of x equals 4x. So we're saying g of x is 4x minus 9. So you know that in this case, we have a 4x, or f of x, and we have a minus k. In this case, the k is 9. So in this case, we'll be going down. will be translating down. Here we have f of x is 2x plus 1. And h of x is saying we're going to have f of x, whatever f of x is, plus 7. F of x is 2x plus 1. Substitute it. So instead of saying f of x, we're saying 2x plus 1. So h of x is 2x plus 1 plus 7. So h of x is 2x, and 1 plus 7 is 8. It's 2x plus 8. So as you can see, we have f of x plus a k. This is just a general form of it. So we have the f of x, in this case, the h of x, plus a k. The k is the 8, so it's going up. All this is vertical. When you see f of x, or you see x by itself in parentheses, plus a k, or minus a k, it goes up or down. Now, horizontal is different. In the parentheses, x will share with another letter, x plus h, or x minus h. Now, this is very important. When you see in horizontal, when you see a plus h, you're thinking to yourself, well, this means we should go to the right, plus. But remember, keep this in mind. Whatever you're thinking, do the opposite. Plus does mean go to the right. But when you're doing translations, when you see a plus h, go to the left. When you see a minus h, go to the right. And I'll explain that shortly. So tell me, which one would this be? Here I have f of x is 3x, and j of x, just using j of x, could be g of x, could be h of x, doesn't matter. We're saying f, x plus 2. So again, remember, when you see x not alone, this is the h we were talking about, right? The h, it's plus h, in this case plus 2. We know, just by looking at this, it's going to be horizontal. We're shifting to the left or to the right. So let's substitute. Now we're saying j of x, you're going to take the constant next to the variable and leave it outside the parentheses. Put this 3 there. You're saying x plus 2, and there's nothing else here, so there'll be nothing here. But if there was something here, let's say this was 3x plus 1, then the 1 will go outside the parentheses. Any constants will go outside the parentheses. So we have to distribute here. We're saying 3 times x is 3x, 3 times 2 is 6. So j of x is 3x plus 6. Remember, if you have a plus, your instincts are saying go this way, right? They're saying go this way, because that's what you would do on a number line. But if you do the opposite with translations, if you're saying plus 6, go to the left. The translation will go to the left. So right now, I just want you to understand, if you see something like this, it's horizontal. If you see the x alone, it's vertical. Let's do another one. See if we can do this one. What do you think it's going to be, horizontal or vertical? Well, you know it's going to be horizontal because you see the x isn't alone. So what should we do here? How should we substitute this? So let's take h of x, take the constants. We're saying 4. We want the constants outside the parentheses. X minus 2. Here's another constant, the 1. Bring it here, right? Plus 1. Because it says plus 1. And then distribute. So h of x would be 4x minus 8 plus 1. Combine like terms. H of x is 4x minus 7. Okay? So we know this is horizontal. Our instinct is saying minus, go to the left, but remember, do the opposite of our instinct. So we're going to the right. We're translating to the right. Okay, let's look at a horizontal one. Let's say I had, got a clean paper here. Let's say we have that f of x, let's say x minus 2. Say x minus 2. And now we're saying that g of x, let's say g of x is going to be whatever f of x is, it's going to be f of x plus 3. fix that. There we go. So we know this is horizontal because the x is not alone, right? It has a plus or a minus in it. So let's fix this now. So we're saying that g of x, this function, now there's no number, there's no slope next to the x, so it's just 1. You don't have to put the 1, but let's just put it there for now. We're saying x plus 3, and then we have the minus 2 outside of it. So as you can see, we don't really need that 1 there, so it just becomes x plus 3 minus 2. So g of x would just be x plus 1. That's what g of x would be. So let's look at the, so we're saying here, the original thing we're saying is that we should be going, look at this 3 here. Let's put this 3 here. So this 3 is telling us that we should be 3 away from the original equation. We should be 3 away from f of x, left or right. What do you think? Is it left or right? Well, let's look at the map. Let's look at the chart here. So this was f of x, the original equation. We'll say f of x, and that we said it was x minus 2. So that was this equation right here. Okay, and now we're saying that this one is g of x. Right here. So from g of x to f of x, we went 3. Let's see. From this point to this point, 1, 2, 3. From this point to this point, 1, 2, 3. From this point to that point, 1, 2, 3. So you can see it's 3 away. But if this was our original, one, we're actually going 3 to the left. So remember to think the opposite. Let's go back to that equation here. So here we have x plus 3. Right? We're saying from g of x to f of x, we go x plus 3. 1, 2, 3. But if we wanted to find what our translation would be, we're actually moving it to the left from f of x to g of x. This is saying from g of x to the f of x. So just think the opposite. Always think the opposite. So we're going 3 to the left. We would write it this, from g of x to f of x. That's a horizontal translation. So let's see if we can clear this up. When you see, bring this over, let's erase this. Let's bring this over again. So when you see this, when you see that the x is with a letter, we know it's horizontal. So here's where you have to think. You have to think the opposite. This is where students get confused. When you see x plus a number, when we're moving left on the grid, we're moving left. When you see minus, we're moving right. So if we look here, we had that from G to F, we moved 3 to the right. But our original line was this line. So we're moving 3 backwards. So again, plus, left, minus, right. Think of the opposite. Now you're thinking in your head, okay, it's a plus, let me move to the right. But do the opposite. Now in vertical translations, the x is alone. When you see a plus, you go up. When you see a minus, move down. Okay, great job.